So this video is called My New Player Experience in WoW as a Final Fantasy XIV player and Why I'm Done.
Hi, I'm Sync Weaver, and I'm a Final Fantasy XIV player. By this time, I have
Same.
redone, reshot, rewrote, and rethought how I was going to present my new player experience to the world in a fashion that wasn't going to upset the majority of fans in both the World of Warcraft fanbase and possibly the Final Fantasy fanbase.
See, I have no problem pissing people off. I'm just going to say what I want to say if I think it's true, and if it pisses you off, oh well, and if it doesn't, I'm glad you enjoyed it.
I quickly realized, however, that the
But that's, it's going to be almost impossible to be completely honest about how you feel about either game or both games without pissing people off because of how passionate people are about these games. Like, if you're going to be as opinionated as I'm going to be, you're going to piss people off.
fanbase I really had to look out for were the World of Warcraft fans that had a huge opinion on the game as it currently stands.
That attitude pisses you off? Well, that sucks. Sucks for you.
I can't stand the game. I can't stand the people who play it. I can't stand the content creators who are still simping for it because all of their money depends on it. So they stand around and pretend like they're not talking shit about other games to disguise the fact that they're terrified. Because it's the only way that they have to cope. I'm fucking sick of it, dude. I'm fucking sick of it. I'm fucking sick of the WoW community. I'm fucking sick of that shit company. I'm fucking sick of that shit game. I'm sick of putting so much of my time, energy, and love into that fucking universe to have it all crumble around me because perverted mid-30-year-old and 40-year-old men can't keep their fucking hands to themselves.
I wanted to be able to convey my feelings and at the same time not push too many boundaries so that my comment section doesn't end up a war zone like so many others who put out their opinions on the internet for the world to see like an open book idiot. And trust me, I know I'm an idiot when it comes to WoW for the most part, but I want to preface this again. I am a new player and this is my new player experience. I may have not made it to endgame or obtained any good.
So this guy is the opposite of me. Alright, so whereas I went from WoW to Final Fantasy, this guy did the opposite. This is going to be interesting.
Gear or had done any raids or the mini dungeons from Wrath of Legion. I also never joined any guilds, had the opportunity to craft much, or experience all of Shadowlands, but this is still a new player's experience and should be seen as someone getting into the game and not someone.
You know it's a new player experience because the way he has his LVY. Look at that basic, uncustomized LVY he has up.
Someone who has already beaten the game. With that being said, I plan to talk about my ventures through the story, as the narrative is very important to me in video games such as World of Warcraft. I'd expect the story itself.
Okay, so this is interesting because I've watched a video like this one before, and the other guy said the same exact thing as this guy. He said that, well, I went into it and I expected that the narrative was going to be presented in a certain way, and he emphasized a lot how he found the narrative in World of Warcraft to be lackluster. And because I had the opposite thing happen to me, where I went from World of Warcraft over to then Final Fantasy XIV, I wasn't expecting... I was expecting the narrative to be good, but I saw it at first initially as a burden that I had to get through so I could get to the raid content and so I could get into, the really meaty and fast-paced parts of the game. That was kind of the mindset I had going into it. So you could see how the MMO that you initially start with primes you for the expectations of the ones you play afterwards.
Would keep a hold on me, but what I found out while playing through Shadowlands and BFA was something I personally can compare to jumping in the middle of a new playing film, which is on its 5th sequel. I will be talking about the system and how I've been interacting with quests, events, and other gameplay mechanics that I, as a new player, have experienced thus far, though I can say that mostly everything functions as it should. I have seen a few graphical hiccups here and there, and honestly, as an old game, I get it. Last, I'll be talking about my overall view of World of Warcraft as a new player. I may come from Final Fantasy XIV as of this video, but if you remember from my last video, which you should go and watch, I have what might be an unhealthy amount of MMOs under my belt. I've played Fly for fun, for fuck's sake. And remember, this is all from the viewpoint of a new player's experience. This does not mean
I've played some Fly FF. back from the day. It was horrible.
I have to be at endgame or have played all the content in the expansion. I couldn't even if I wanted to anyway. This means that what I'm going through is not in-game experience or whole game experience, which I would count if I had played through all the content or made it to endgame. But we'll see if I have the push for endgame by the time I make it to the end of this video.
Yeah, see, he's even starting his video with story.
So, how do I begin this scrapbook style story narrative as a new player? Well, let's talk about BFA. Functionally, BFA was supposed to be the expansion where everything would go back to zero. Essentially, it would be Alliance versus Horde once again.
That's exactly what I thought, because when I got into BFA, had taken a long break from the game and a long hiatus from the game, and so BFA was my foray back into World of Warcraft as an adult. And when I first saw the cinematic, that's exactly what I thought. I thought this is going to be a return to form, because when I played vanilla, it was very much focused on the conflict between Horde and Alliance, and when I saw the cinematic, I'm like, okay, this is going to focus back on the conflict between Horde and Alliance, therefore, the game is going to be probably how I remembered it as a kid. They were playing on my nostalgia, and, you know, hook, line, and sinker, I took the bait.
And that was what I was feeling during the cinematics, the NPC voice-acted scenarios, and the fact that every Alliance member is hard races to everything Horde. And trust me when I say that both sides aren't good if you play the other side. While on the Alliance side, which was the only experience I had while playing, the Horde seemed to have been coming up with plans at certain locations around these new sets of islands. The point of my character, who is called the Champion, which, okay. First off, what the hell happened between me freeing myself from the Lich King and being summoned to Anduin all of a sudden? Like 3 minutes ago I was being pelted by fruit in the street, the next thing I know I'm being called the Champion. The narrative around this confused me like no tomorrow. I actually had to ask outside help for a summary of what's going on in the story. BFA is after Burning Crusade, Wrath of the Lich King, Cataclysm, Mist of Pandaria, Legion, and Warlords of Draenor. Death Knights, the class I decided to be, debuted in Wrath, making my character out to be either some sort of time traveler or perhaps I just time skipped anime style to the latest expansion.
So in defense of World of Warcraft here a little bit, World of Warcraft from its inception wasn't intended to be a story-driven game. World of Warcraft was very, very light on story elements when vanilla came out, and you know, you could get some lore from reading quests, and you could get some lore from kind of exploring around, but it was never intended and built to be a story-driven game to begin with, you know? Unlike A Realm Reborn, you know, that was intended to be a narrative first experience, and so it's easier to build narrative on top of narrative, but to build narrative on top of what initially was never intended to be narrative is definitely more difficult from a game design perspective. Absolutely it is. Now that leads me to ask the question, should Blizzard have gone the route of trying to then weave in these cinematic heavy narratives in the more later expansions? And the answer to that question is probably not, and that's probably why it seems that in Dragonflight they're going to be returning to an experience where it's a lot lighter on the narrative telling, and you're, you know, going to be getting the lore from playing the game. That's what it seems like they're going to do, right?
Also, for those of you who may be asking, what about Chromie? He doesn't work for me. More specifically, he doesn't allow new players to go back in time and experience the past expansions authentically. That means my escapades in the Outlands were for nothing. My exploration of the Legion areas will be for nothing, because as soon as I reach level 48, the game kicks me to the current expansion. And to put credence into my explanation here, I asked Bellular when he was doing his Q&A on stream. He actually clipped the entire segment if you want to take a look, and yes, that was my question. I asked, what is the new player experience like for WoW now? And he explained pretty much everything.
It's a pity that they throw you out of Chromie time once you hit level 50. I don't know if they ever removed that.
I believe that's completely in there, where it's just, oh, you're done, out you go.
Yeah, because it's like, it's not great if you're enjoying a zone and then you're like yoinked out before you finish the quest. So that is odd.
So no context, no lore, no character growth, if any, and no explanation as to why I'm now called the Champion. And before you guys write the explanation down in the comments, know that telling me why I'm called the Champion is not your job. It's the game's job. World of Warcraft's story, from my point of view, is very disconnected to me as a new player, and I think it's because it emphasizes on reaching endgame rather than going through a solid story, which is a damn shame. Imagine.
And the reason why that is, of course, in part, you can clearly see because of the incentives put in place that you want to emphasize building your game around endgame when you have put level boosts in the game that are $60 per character. So then you're basically incentivized to make leveling as boring as possible, as confusing as possible, as tedious as possible, and you want to create a sense of urgency for players to then skip the leveling so then they can buy the boost so then they can get to end game. It's you're not going to find a situation where they're going to both be financially incentivized to facilitate skipping in the game and making that content that they want people to skip good. Like, you don't get both of those at once.
Attending Hogwarts at year 6 or watching The Lord of the Rings on movie 3 an hour in. I'm so caught off guard about shit happening to me, I legit had a complaint in the first few minutes into BFA. That being, why the fuck was Jaina arrested? And better yet, why the hell was I arrested? Like, we're supposed to be ambassadors for Stormwind and they just arrest our ass. Like, what the fuck, man? Oh, an even better question. Who the fuck is Jaina? The game doesn't explain anything about her to me. I get no synopsis, catch-up video, or even a glossary on who Jaina is. It just expects me to know. Anyway, I'm in jail, and for some reason, the guards were stupid enough to let us out. Well, they didn't, but it was way too easy because this Finn fellow who I actually like allowed us to escape. Murdering my way through the prison, Flynn and I organized a prison break and escape out the sewers. We then hitch a ride back to Cold Terrace, where I conveniently can just walk around without anyone caring, even though I would officially be a wanted fugitive, but okay. And before I go on with this, some of you may say I should be in Exile's Reach, for which I have to say, tell Blizzard that! When I started playing WoW, I chose to be a Draenei Paladin, a Worgen Death Knight, and a Night Elf Demon Hunter. None, I repeat, none of them start off.
You know how he said that Blizzard just expected me to know who Jaina was? Well, that's because Blizzard doesn't design the game for new players. Blizzard designs the game for either current players or returning players. He is not their target audience. They didn't design the game for him, and even with Dragonflight's release, the way that they're talking about Dragonflight and returning to the way that things used to be, it seems like once again they're not making things for new players. But that is contradicted with things like putting something like Exile's Reach into the game, because putting Exile's Reach into the game was very clearly put there for new players. So they're simultaneously trying to cater and to make the game appealing to people who were past vets or past players, and they want to rope them in, but then they also put in things like Exile's Reach to bring in new players without facilitating a new player experience and without keeping them in mind past Exile's Reach. It actually doesn't make any sense.
In Exile's Reach for some reason. I don't know where the island is, I
They
don't
didn't
know
tie
how
it
to
into
get there,
anything,
and I
exactly.
definitely don't know why I started out like this. But even if that's so, and I was supposed to start in Exile's Reach, why can't I just start in my given areas anyway? This has been a constant thing with WoW folk, and I get it, you're trying to help, but take a look at the screen and you tell me why I'm not in Exile's Reach. And look, the point is that I really don't need Tutorial Island at this point. All the starting areas were fine to play in, but I do get the concern. Exile's Reach has you on a boat going to an island looking for a lost crew, and it is here where you can gain a buttload of experience, but here's the thing, I do not care for experience, but I do care for the experience of playing the game.
Again, I think this mentality and this expectation is an artifact of coming from Final Fantasy XIV, because I'm so used to playing the old school MMOs, from playing vanilla World of Warcraft, from playing old school RuneScape, and even playing retail World of Warcraft, to have the next level up the thing that incentivized me most to continue to play the game, and the thing that I was most looking forward to, that ding, I'm level 52, that ding, I'm level 53, that ding, I'm level 54. That is what kept me pushing. That is what motivated me to keep going. And it was very strange for me to notice then, going into Final Fantasy XIV, to catch myself not even realizing what level I was at. Like, I don't look at what level I'm at. It doesn't matter to me. It's not relevant. I don't really care how much experience this specific quest gives me because I'm so entrenched in the story, because I'm so entrenched with the experience that the game provides outside of the systems that, facilitate the motivation for you to play it. And so him saying that I don't really care about the experience it gives, I care about the experience XP, the number it gives you. I care about the experience that I have as a player, I think is an artifact of him playing 14. Now, am I saying it's bad game design to have it where you're motivated to play so then you can get to the next level? I wouldn't say it's necessarily bad game design, but what I do think is, for as fun as it is, that really is something that wears out very quickly. The fun you get from that wears out very quickly. And as each level gets harder and harder and harder to attain to, and grindier and grindier and grindier to attain to, you ask yourself at each ding, was it worth it? And from level 9 to 10, maybe it was. It was fun enough where it was worth getting from level 9 to 10. And same thing from 10 to 11. But if you, take it back to vanilla, and you're trying to get from level 57 to 58, it might not be worth it for you anymore. Or if you're trying to get from 58 to 59, all of the grinding you have to do and all of the staring down at your XP bar and seeing like the minutest of increments after each quest you turn in, you might ask yourself, maybe this isn't worth it after all, even though it was fun initially. And so that is the problem with that game design. For as fun as it could be, it doesn't last forever. And that's why back in the day, the vast majority of players didn't actually get to level 60 in vanilla.
This means going through the story and BFA being the go-to expansion for new players was quite the head-scratcher. If you think about it, I started off in an expansion where it's Alliance versus Horde again, but where's the context as to why I'm supposed to hate the Horde if I'm on the Alliance side? No narrative means no context, meaning no interest from Sinkweaver. And even so, while in Colterus, I had learned that 3 houses were MIA, and apparently it's my job to figure out why? Okay, why? I do get the help in the form of one NPC that follows me to one of 3 locations, but it doesn't last too long before we meet other central characters. One has me going through the Pyre Camp, which was kind of cool, and related to a lot of the theme of Colterus being a sea-dwelling sanctum. Another place had me dealing with witches and the occult, and let me just tell you, the story was way too long and it overstayed its welcome. I did find my first NPC glitch here, which didn't load in, but honestly, this was just so overbearing, so tiring, I got bored in this place, and we eventually found out who and why this all happened, but honestly, it took me out of the story. NPCs not loading in would start to become a constant at this point, so let that be a thing to remember. I also did my second dungeon here as well, a big monster-infested manor where all types of ghastly things reside. Kind of reminds me of Hulkame Manor from Final Fantasy XIV, to be honest. The last place I visited had a lot to do with ships and them being built. However, it was here where I decided to pay for Shadowlands, and the game immediately told me to talk to some Bolvar guy. Now, I didn't want to overlevel and become level 60 before taking on Shadowlands, so I immediately started Shadowlands at that point of time. And I could have stayed and did all of BFA, but I had a feeling I wouldn't be too interested in it. The story was already throwing me off with these separate locations and their mysterious problems.
When this war began, I thought we were fighting for peace. But we're just fighting.
I would rather check out the Land of the Dead than taking hours on end with finishing a story I am not emotionally or mentally invested in. For an extra clear meaning, I was bored of the story of BFA. So onward to Shadowlands as a level 50 Death Knight. Now, Shadowlands...
And that again is a indication of the incongruency that Blizzard has approached their game design with. Just a little bit ago, I was talking about how they were simultaneously trying to appeal to new players through putting in something like Exile's Reach, but not tying it into everything, and trying to appeal to older players through, some of the other things that they put into the game, such as, creating the expectation that we're going to be returning to a vanilla-esque experience, because that was a conflict between Horde and Alliance with BFA. Now we have a conflict with Horde and Alliance again. They did the same thing with Shadowlands by using the goodwill of the Lich King, and now they're doing the same thing again by using the goodwill of the Talent Trees primarily, right? And you see it here again, where the game was designed to create a situation where you want to get to that next level and you're really just trying to fill up bars, and it's the filling up of bars and that ding, that dopamine that you get when you ding, that keeps you playing. right? And this is fun. I actually enjoy games like this for the most part, usually, unless they're filled with a bunch of bullshit systems. I don't mind it. I like that kind of game design. But then they're also trying to weave in the story in a way that feels forced. It doesn't feel like it belongs into the game. They, might have done a better job by sticking to their roots or doing a Realm Reborn 2.0 ordeal, where then they rebuild the game from the ground up to fit and to adhere to these sorts of narratives. Now, if they were to do that, then there's something else they would need to fix, which is the actual storytelling, right? Because even though the game wasn't intended to be a story-driven game, there is still something to be desired with the storytelling that they have shoehorned in since then.
Shadowlands does have an interesting story, but again, we're talking about characters I don't know being whisked away to the land of the dead without being killed or just having their souls going there by default or something. I mean, I don't know if the jailer needs them alive in the sense, but within the Shadowlands, when you die, you become fuel for the Shadowlands. Yet another cycle of life and death that happens when you die, and another cycle of life and death. Yeah, I'm not sure about this story, Captain. So apparently, I am the only one who has the ability to escape them all via these first one relics that had me travel to a place called Oribos, a city with keepers who tend to some giant woman called the Arbiter. Her job is to send all souls to their final destination in the afterlife, a life after death where souls are supposed to live out a new immortal life. Some go to be Grand Guardians who shepherd souls in a place called the Bastion. Some get sent to a large violent battlefield to live out their immortal life for 5 more minutes in Maldraxxus. Some go to the center of nature as a seed or plant or a reborn soul in a place called Ardenweld. And some get sent to be punished in Revendreth, where souls are tortured until they are deemed sinless. Some are just dropped into hell, which is the Maw. There we meet the jailer who keeps our friends or important acquaintances. I don't really know them so well, but they're locked up and tortured. Anduin especially. You do save them for about 30 minutes until you're told to leave them behind because the first one's technology only works for you, miraculously Deus Ex Machina style. That is how you get to Oribos and how you start your journey off to the different reaches of the Shadowlands by finding the firstborns and bringing them together to stop an anime shortage. Anima shortage. I'd be in a crisis if I lost my anime too. What's Anima? Well, it's a new resource that's supposedly used to help get better gear, give reason for more players to keep up the grind, and it's also what keeps the Shadowlands going, because it's fuel. You see, the Arbiter distributes the soul to their final destination. When they get there, they exude Anima, the very element that souls are made of. So when you die, you become fuel for the Shadowlands nonetheless, but at least you get to essentially live forever in a new reconstructed body. So, you as the main character are out here looking for the firstborns in order to figure out how to awaken the Arbiter, while once again solving the problems that just so happen to pop up when you get there.
And this is formulaic, right? Because they basically just took Azerite power, which existed in BFA, which served as a way to inflate engagement in a way that wasn't necessarily fun, but might have kept the sub money coming in. And they said, okay, well, Azerite power is some arbitrary system that kept some people who were just addicted to the game subbed for longer. And so how can we take this and just do it again in Shadowlands? And how can we do it in such a way that people don't realize what we're doing is literally just recycling Azerite power because they assume that their player base is a lot dumber than their player base actually is. And they're like, okay, I know, let's just call it Anima instead.
Well, at least the excuse is Anima shortage, but I still don't know how Anima works and how it energizes all of Shadowlands. Kind of perplexes me. I always thought the land of the dead in any genre was something very delicate for storytelling. Death is supposed to be the end, but of course there has to be an afterlife, which is fine if you establish rules that make the setting narratively easy to connect with the current universe. You just teleport there, for goodness sake. You're told about it by Bolvar and given very little information about it. You run around the mall like you own the place as soon as you get there, and almost immediately find Jaina and Thrall having a moment as you decimate your enemies into oblivion. And this wouldn't bother me so much if it wasn't for the fact that you solve so many problems so fast narratively that I honestly think that your character might just be some sort of god. But I will admit one thing, the story for World of Warcraft Shadowlands is okay. Not so exciting for me when I have no context for anything, as Blizzard expects me to beat the main story so I can use Chromie and go back in time so to relive past expansions whose stories have already been retconned in some way. Like how Kil'jaeden found the Helm of Domination only for it to have been planted there by the jail.
I feel like this guy, in his short little foray into World of Warcraft, knows more about the World of Warcraft lore and story than I do.
Or something. So Kil'jaeden finds the helm and uses it to make the Lich King, who would go around killing people, thereby sending their souls to the Shadowlands and fuel the jailer. But then you got Sylvanas coming out of nowhere with Deus Ex Machina powers, kicking this guy's ass, who's supposedly comparable to the Lich King. You also have this whole Lich King thing that was supposedly Kil'jaeden's idea for world conquest and how he's connected to the true enemy of Azeroth, Sargeras, until Shadowlands happened and the sword is still stuck in Azeroth's butt crack. And we're just gonna ignore this thing sticking out of her butt. Like, we're just gonna ignore this. Okay. Like, BFA had almost nothing to do with Azeroth as the Titan Spirit who should be awakening
Ian did come out and say that they're working on expansions 2 ahead at a time. He said that when they were doing the Dragonflight announce. So it's very possible that they expect to deal with the sword situation in the next expansion after Dragonflight. Or it could be dealt with in one of the patches that come out after base Dragonflight. Or it could even be during Dragonflight itself, and they just didn't say it. I mean, it's possible. I'm not saying that's what the case is, but it's possible that's what they're doing. They can't ignore it forever. I mean, they can, but it wouldn't make any sense if they did.
Or something, but no. We're chasing this guy named Zavol across the Shadowlands only to lose and eventually have Sylvanas be like, I serve no one. You've been serving the elf army, Arthas, the
Yeah, that
Horde,
made no sense. That made no sense.
and now the jailer for a few years now. And here, right now, you'll say you serve no one? What the fuck do you think he saw in you this whole entire time? A partner? Fuck no. He ordered your ass around like a hooker at a bachelor party.
This is a shakedown.
Mr. Blizzard, this isn't going to work.
Yeah,
Blizzard.
you and 5 of those
Plot holes.
get out.
Sylvanas is the biggest confusion for me in this entire continuity. She was an elf general who Arthas turned into a banshee. She then freed herself only to use the Horde for some sinister death plot because of the jailer. Like, she is so unlikable to me, it's not even funny.
It just occurred to me. I wonder if, after seeing how popular the Final Fantasy XIV story and MSQ was with its player base, and seeing how they have made the player the forefront of the game, that they decided just to yeet it and try to do it themselves. They saw that the Warrior of Light was a popular concept in Final Fantasy XIV, and they're like, why don't we try to do this ourselves? When did A Realm Reborn 2.0 come out? Around 2014. And if I recall correctly, that's around Draenor. And if I recall correctly, that's around the time when they started trying to push the narrative of you, the player, are now at center stage. Because before then, the player was never center stage. You were just a random pleb. Did they take it from 14 and just fumble it miserably? I don't think that's far-fetched. Not at all.
And what's more, I still have no idea what's going on in WoW. I have no idea. Like, I get what's up in Shadowlands, and barely for BFA, but I still don't know who any of the main cast are. I still have no idea why the Arbiter broke down, and where the fuck is Illidan? He's like the only character I know because of YouTube.
You are not prepared.
You're right, Illidan. I was not prepared. And now my head hurts. Listen, let's just move on.
Gameplay. Okay, here we go. I expect him to say good things about the gameplay. I don't expect him to have many complaints about this, because it feels really
I've
good
heard
to
the
hit
systems in
buttons
World
well.
of Warcraft were pretty average. So average, in fact, that programs from third parties developed these things called add-ons. And to be honest, they work pretty well. As you can see, I have a more organized UI, but I'm just not feeling okay with all this. You see, when you play Final Fantasy XIV, you are not allowed to use third-party programs,
Right.
not even ones that act essentially like calculators. WoW is on the other end, embracing the add-on culture almost to a giant slightly slanted T. You have so many add-ons for so many things that even some raiders won't allow you to raid unless you have a certain add-on to help get through the harder raids.
Deadly boss mods in particular, and probably Recores too.
To be honest, the add-on thing isn't so offensive to me, but some add-ons like this one that shows you how to beat a boss can feel somewhat spoiling. In Final Fantasy XIV, every raid can be done by sheer grit, will, reflex, and memory. World of Warcraft's raids seem to have RNG in the mix, which can delete a raid in 3 seconds, and I'm not sure I want to be a part of that. Like, take this add-on for instance. This is supposed to be an add-on for changing your UI to look like Final Fantasy XIV's UI. Can't get it to work, but things like this is okay for me.
I don't know if I agree with this point right here. He says that in the World of Warcraft raids, there's more of a reliance on RNG, and that might put you in a situation where you might just have like a bad run, and you're just gonna have to deal with that. I think that might add some excitement to the game. It might add that sense of mystery in the background of, oh my God, is this gonna be it? Are we gonna do it? Are we gonna do it or something? And it just adds an extra layer of mystery. Now, can it be annoying? Of course it could be annoying, but it also adds more tension and excitement as well. You know, just like you would in a gambling situation.
Programs like DBM, if I said that right, seem to take
Like poker is half luck, half skill. And it's exciting because of its RNG elements.
the fun out of figuring out a boss in an MMO. Take for example, I memorized everything he did to the point I was the call-out guy, and I loved the fight very much. It was fun figuring out how to beat him after a few raid parties. But when I see raids using DBM because of the many stupid RNG mechanics, I don't blame the player, I wholeheartedly blame the game. I heard the one who was leading WoW was a raid designer, but having RNG and bosses that can never be
Ian.
told as to what will happen doesn't seem quite right to me. And I know it's not in every single boss in every single raid, I know it's only in a few, but I'm just saying if there's RNG in any kind of boss and you need a program to deal with it, well, it just doesn't feel right for me. In 14, you have body language, and following said body language can help you dodge attacks that have no telegraphs. It's quite fun, but I will respect the people who made the add-on for the purpose of the whole RNG thing, or because it can just be a bit frustrating. Another issue I kept running into was the sheer amount of mobs that would be in your way for almost every quest you go on. Sometimes I want to leave. I don't have flying, and enemies seem to lock onto your character where you might just want to go and slow you down when they hit you. And to be honest, I wouldn't complain about this at all if it wasn't for the fact that almost every quest you go on, you need to go through mobs for whatever reason, and their lock on and their range is unbelievably far. And
Now, where I see it getting frustrating incorporating RNG into your raid design is if you've had a few bad runs. And the reason why you've had a few bad runs isn't because of the RNG, but it's because of some of your teammates, you know, not carrying their weight. And let's say you've been patient with your teammates and you've tried to explain to them what to do very politely, very kindly, and finally you get to a situation where your teammates might be pulling through, but then after that you wipe due to RNG. Now that would suck. That would suck.
it doesn't even matter what quest you're on. You could be finding somebody, you could be trying to locate an item, it doesn't matter. There's always a mob there to stop you and get in your way. Again, I wish WoW had a line of sight system so you could just sneak behind a mob without triggering them. Like, even from behind, they just know, hey, I'll just slip behind you, buddy. And no, some mobs have eagle vision and can climb wall faces like it ain't no thing, but
I'm still getting accustomed to the fact that mobs do have line of sight in Final Fantasy. I just assume because I come from WoW that they don't. Like, that's why I never try to sneak up on a mob. It's still not something I'm used to doing in Final Fantasy.
ahead of myself. Line of sight, these mofos please. What's interesting is how things are virtually the same if expansions mean anything in terms of quest activity. You talk to NPC, you accept quests from NPC who now have an immersion window due to the immersion mod. You kill things, find things, click things, rinse and repeat. It's just about the same as the last expansion on what you do, but to be fair, all MMOs suffer from this stagnation.
I was literally about to say Final Fantasy does the same thing. Final Fantasy does the same thing, and the way that the MSQ works is a lot like an onion, right? You have the overarching story, which is the main layer on top, And then in an internal layer, you have maybe like a complex chore you have to solve. And then within the context of that complex chore, you have mini micro chores that you have to do to solve the big one. Once you solve the big one, you move on to the next complex chore, and then the overarching MSQ kind of carries that way, right? So you have layers of within layers within layers within MSQ, and those bottom layers more or less are very similar to ones that you've done before them.
Final Fantasy XIV also suffers from quests being stagnant. The same kill monster quest, find items, find
Thank you,
NPC,
yes.
go to location,
Exactly.
and blah blah blah. The only difference is the story significance it has in the area. Sometimes doing side quests can change the NPC and location layout as though you actually did something in the area. WoW on the other hand doesn't have that for their side quests, but for the main story quests only. Side quests have you interacting in the area mostly through mobs and interactable quest specific items that disappear once clicked. Most of them respawn for other players to complete their quests, but that's par for the course. The quests feel kinda similar to BFA, but it's not really a bother to me. I just wish the side quests were more important to the surrounding area, but maybe I'm not looking in the right place, or I'm looking far too into quest functionality. Well, it's not all that important compared to the game's inner system itself. When you have a special event happening in a location, you usually see some loading by the NPCs. They may actually disappear right in front of you, and I'm always caught off guard by that. Perhaps it means to load the event from further away so the player doesn't notice. It would help keep the immersion while playing the game, because so far that kind of program.
You know what's really annoying on this note? On the fact of NPCs, coming in and coming out sharding. Sharding is annoying as shit. How many times have you told one of your buddies to meet me up in, like, I don't know, some random zone, and you go there and you realize that you're on a different layer and you have to deal with that, or you realize that you have war mode off or they have war mode off, and then you have to go back to the main city? That shit is so fucking annoying, dude. Yeah, sharding is terrible and dog shit, yeah.
Programming is evidence of some early MMO lazy developing. Another odd thing is how you can just walk right into a dungeon without a word or warning.
Forgive my ignorance, but what is sharding? Okay, so in World of Warcraft Battle Fries, what you have is you have the situation where you have a given server, and within that server, there are different instances of every single zone within that server. So I might be standing right next to you, but you might be on a different layer or a different shard than I'm on. So even though we're standing right next to each other, we're on different instances, even though we're on the same server. Now, before I continue this video, for everyone in chat right now, I might not get to your chats right away because I want to upload this video onto YouTube. And so to, keep congruence to the video, I might not get to you right away, but I plan on getting to you at the end of the video.
Warning, dungeons in World of Warcraft are not to be done alone. Now, since the level crunch and all, but far too often do I find myself walking to a dungeon and then whoops, I'm dead. 14 pretty much forces you to use a party finder through something called a duty roulette. It's very similar to Dungeon Finder, so I know the concept, but why can players walk into dungeons like that? I just don't know. Perhaps a relic of the past where people would form parties outside the dungeon? I really don't know. The Dungeon Finder is a great way to queue up for parties going through whatever expansion you set yourself on. Debuted in Wrath, the Dungeon Finder allows for a player to choose random or specific dungeons they wish to play in. You are randomly set with 4 other people in a party, and you go inside a dungeon that is within your level. The problem here is that I only had access to Shadowlands and BFA, and I'm not really too sure why I can't go into past dungeons. Here I'm showing it on the screen right now just to show proof. 14 had you unlock dungeons so that you were proper level when going through the duty finder. WoW just lets you go in even if the story wasn't caught up to it, meaning I can go into a dungeon that was supposed to be done in the future due to story, and here I'm wondering why they would allow that. I only have to be the right level in order to get into the dungeon. Story does not really matter in this case. Perhaps to get me to max level faster, I wasn't too sure, but what I can say is that since you have a dungeon finder, why have open entrances to dungeons in the first place? This seems like either lazy design or perhaps there was a point to it, and if there is, please tell me.
Because the game is kind of designed in a way where so many of the remnants of the past are something that is hard to now take out of the game, but is, making it so that current and future game design is a pain in the ass. And the example I gave of this yesterday was the specs. I feel like specs make it so difficult for WoW to balance. They make it so difficult for Blizzard to create fair PvP situations and not meta to shit PvE situations, but they're a relic of the past. And they're hard to get rid of for that reason. Now, I still think they should, they should just pull the trigger and say, fuck it. we're gonna do something that might piss a lot of the people off, and maybe we'll take away specs and have each class be only one spec, and that might cause people to mold, but it'll be better for the longevity of the game if they do it and they pull it off correctly, and it helps them balance it correctly, and then they don't have to worry about it, and they'll still have a good game. And in the long run, I think that'll facilitate a situation where it'll be better both for the players and for Blizzard as a company as well.
Because far too many
Which is what they did with the Realm Reborn 2.0, right? It's the same thing. They might have, created a situation where they isolated some people who really liked 1.0, the few that existed, or they might have pissed off people who might have, made progress in a 1.0 and feel invested in their character in 1.0 because they made so much progress on them, to then wipe the game and make 2.0. But in the long run, it was better for the game. So Blizzard just has to have the courage to do that if it's what's required, which in many ways it does seem like they're being held back by, design choices of old.
times have I just waltzed right into a dungeon without knowing it was a dungeon and getting my ass handed to me on a platter with a side of salt. Again, I think it's to form a party outside. I just don't know why they have the dungeon open. It's far too powerful for any single person to go through, especially Legion and up. Leveling. So, leveling is easy. It's way too easy. It's so easy that I literally made it to level 50 in a matter of a few days of playing WoW. And I was in BFA the whole time. And not only that, I wasn't even halfway finished the...
Okay, so he said it's easy because I got there within a few days. So does he mean to say that it's fast? Because that I can agree with. But if you don't pay attention while leveling, you will die. Like, it's not like a cakewalk. It's no more easier than it is in Final Fantasy. So maybe he just meant it's fast.
Expansion from what I was told. This makes me feel like leveling wasn't even meant to have been an experience for new players coming to WoW. Like, when I was little and I heard about WoW and how reaching max level was an achievement for so many people because the leveling process was actually an experience, I was hoping to feel the same thing via the story, like leveling with the story along the way.
The reason why it was such an accomplishment back then is for two reasons. One, because it was obviously grindy as fuck. So it's like, wow, you pulled through that big ass grind. It had nothing to do with the story. Sweet Summer Child, yeah, exactly. So that's one component. And the second component is he said that some people were talking about how WoW and leveling in WoW used to be such an experience. What made it an experience wasn't how grindy the game was. What made it an experience was how the game incentivized you so strongly to group up with people to be able to level better, quicker, easier. And it's through that incentive to group up with people and the social experiences that you had along the way that made it an experience. He says here that I was hoping it would be an experience through the story. And what people mean when they say it was an experience back in the day had nothing to do with the story, or at most very little to do with the story, and had much more to do with the fact that it was such a social experience. And I miss that about MMOs, and I'm waiting for the day that we get that again. And I don't know if it's possible. I was hoping New World was going to be the one. Final Fantasy XIV is a great game, and it has very cool social components, but it does not in any way compel you so strongly through the leveling process to group up with people. I love that experience. And maybe Ashes will pull it off. You'll have to see.
Way. But no, leveling with the story is if you ignore the side quests and focus on the main quest the whole entire time. And even if you follow the story, you will still over level. I hardly touched the side quests in Shadowlands, only doing them when I reached a wall on my journey when I couldn't find a quest to do. And even there, I had no idea how to advance the story until someone showed me that the map of all things was how I figured out what level I was supposed to be for the next story quest. And to be honest, I was fine being at that wall, because at that time I could actually do a side quest or two and experience something. Now that's not so bad, but I hate not seeing a purpose for the side quests. In Final Fantasy XIV After a Realm Reborn, side quests became a great way to gain experience for almost soloing the story. The experience you gained was enough to advance the plot and have almost no wall to hit. Dungeons were story relevant, and side quests even had story significance. You'd learn more about your surrounding area, its history, the the NPC and why they are here, and even hidden
Spoilers.
lore about people and places. Whereas WoW, you get almost none of that. It's mostly an NPC trying to do something, and you need to help them out by either doing the simplest of tasks or juggernaut level impossible tasks, narratively speaking, that they somehow know that you can do, like killing 30 mobs and steal their souls, or infiltrate the main base of their enemy, or find something important and kill the leader while you're doing this, especially after they said the leader was super dangerous. Hi, Syncweaver from the future.
Killing 30 mobs is something that, although you won't see often in Final Fantasy XIV, I think shows up in WoW, and all of those like mass mob objectives, because you gotta keep in mind, Blizzard was the same company that made, Diablo and Diablo 2, some of the most, if not the foremost, ARPGs. I think, they are the first ARPGs that were designed that way. And so, in some ways, it's not far-fetched to think that World of Warcraft was inspired by these games. And, going out and killing 30 mobs was something that was in the game from the very beginning.
Future, and after going over this entire video that is almost an hour long, I have found that I need to correct myself at this point in time. To elaborate what I mean about the side quest and how it's not correlating with the story, I'm going to admit and say that I am wrong. What I felt with the whole entire side quest is that it just felt kind of disconnected throughout the entirety of BFA and Shadowlands, but that's not true. The main story quest is fine, they are directly connected to the story, whereas the side quest felt like they weren't so connected, but they actually are. They're all connected. Every single side quest, either BFA, Legion, doesn't matter, Shadowlands, it doesn't matter. They're all connected. What I was feeling was a sort of rush, and I felt as though that the side quest didn't mean too much of anything. They didn't correlate with the story, and that was a lot in BFA, but they were correlating to the story. It just, veered off a little bit. It just didn't connect right away. Just didn't feel like everything was, narratively speaking, all put together correctly. So I do apologize for that. I didn't mean to say that the side quests weren't connected to the story. I just meant that they felt disconnected and diffused in some form or fashion. It just felt that way. They're all connected. They're all there. I just felt a little rushed and disconnected from the story at that time, so I do apologize for that. I will say, however, if I'm going to add on to this, when I talked about the mechanics and the systems, I mainly wanted to talk about the core and how everything functioned as a game in terms of WoW, moving your character.
It almost sounds as if he got some backlash for saying that the side quests were disconnected from the main quests before, but this is all done in the same video. So I wonder why he feels like he has to be like so apologetic about like such a minute mistake.
Teleporting, all that other good stuff. I do talk about the systems, but I'm not far enough to know about the whole in-game systems, like artifacts or corruptions or whatever that you have to collect. I'm not there. I never got to that point. So that's more context for that. So I do apologize for that too. Sorry about all this. Let's get back to the video. Well, the rewards are usually pretty useful for keeping up with the story, but sometimes I feel a bit overpowered in some cases, almost like the game wants to hurry me up to the end and enjoy its award-winning raids and endgame dungeons. And in that case, I don't like how rushed I feel, but I do love the rewards in the sense of speed I feel while I'm progressing through the quests. I feel as though that the story was kind of an afterthought to them. Now, from the way I've been nitpicky, you could assume that I dislike the mechanics in WoW, and that couldn't be farther from the truth. In fact, I think the mechanics hold up even after so many years of service. I've said before that I've felt rushed being pushed to the end where the actual game is being played. I can find reasons as to why people would prefer to make it to max level faster when playing an MMO. This is because of people who really don't care for the story. And
No, it's because of level boosts. Obviously.
Fortunately, that's not me. I've met plenty who thought the Final Fantasy XIV
It's because the game design incentivizes you to do that. It's not because of the players are trying to reach a level just because they're those types of players. The game is what compels you to do it.
Story was not interesting and has in many cases made the choice to boost to a higher level, and that's fine if that's your prerogative, but as a warning to those who wish to rush to endgame, you will have a much tougher time trying to figure out how the usual game mechanics work.
And he makes a good point in this video, this content creator, what's his name? Syncweaver. He makes a very good point when he mentions that Ian, before he was the lead game designer of World of Warcraft, was the raid designer of World of Warcraft. So, is it such a surprise to us that the most polished and the highlight of what makes retail World of Warcraft the retail World of Warcraft is the raid content? Is that something that should come as a surprise to us? No, it's not.
And it is this right here where I can compare how I had no idea what the heck I was doing in any dungeon WoW threw me into for the first time in Shadowlands. Boosting to 50 may not yield much of a difficulty, but 60 and 70 is another thing when it comes to 14. And this is how I felt the whole entire time. However, this may not apply to everyone, and so I leave only a warning to those who want to boost, whether you are in WoW or Final Fantasy. As for me, I think mechanically, WoW as an MMO is showing its age, but it still holds up. So I've said before that the combat felt snappy and more responsive compared to Final Fantasy. I'm not thinking that the combat is much better than I thought, but it's still aligned with what I said before. Not saying that either is bad, it'd be like judging toasters that both did the job and got it done, but one was exactly 1 second faster than the other, and the exact result was the same for the second toaster.
Okay, so to play devil's advocate of myself a little bit here as well, what other MMO are we all, maybe mildly familiar with? Maybe we've heard of it once or twice, that also has boosts that, kind of get you up to a much higher level and towards endgame that you can buy for money. That's right, you guessed it. It's Final Fantasy XIV. Now, why does no one really complain about the boost in Final Fantasy XIV, and why am I okay with the way that Final Fantasy XIV implements their boosts? Well, it's because that game is very much created and designed in such a way where it allows you to do the things you want to do and that you care about. And it says, and it's designed in such a way where if you don't want to do a piece of content, you just don't do it. A couple days ago on stream, my stream recommended that I try the Hillebrand questline. You know how I felt about the Hillebrand questline? I didn't really like it. It just wasn't my kind of humor. I like very dark humor. I like offensive humor. It is what it is. Why is that what I find funny? I don't fucking know. But that's what I find funny. So anyway, my point is, if you want to skip the story, I mean, that's just something that you're going to be missing out on. It's not something that you have to play to, really understand the stuff later on. And if you really want to just play Final Fantasy for the raid content, the only one who loses anything is you, because there is a lot of good storytelling and there's a lot of good leveling experience that exists in that game. And so it feels like it's just an extension of that game design of, okay, let's just let people do what they want to do. It's just an extension of that. Whereas in WoW, it feels a lot more like, okay, it's not an extension of letting players do what they want to do. It's something that we're going to force players to do so we can get to the content that actually matters in our game. That's the difference.
Doesn't matter which toaster I use as long as I get my waffle. I need it for chicken. The combat feels good, just as 14 felt good too. I would say other games does combat much better, but for top-of-the-line MMOs like these, I felt that WoW was fast in pace, which gave a feeling of snappy action. Final Fantasy XIV isn't as fast in terms of GCDs, but people soon realize that when you reach level 70, you're now using a kit that requires the use of off-globals in between standard globals. This is also present in WoW, but I feel it's not as prevalent in there as it is in 14. Where 14 has you doing one off global as a usual thing, skill players are often using what is called double weaving. That's when you use 2 off globals between your standard global. This is a very usual thing when it comes to the raiding scene. Hell, some even do triple weaving, but I think you would require skill speed or spell speed to pull that off. For example, I play as Frost Death Knight and had used Blood and Unholy while trying to figure out the difference between the 3. Blood is a tank spec and uses some defensive abilities to maintain itself in battle. Frost uses ice magic to deal damage in all types of ways, usually very heavily, and Unholy is the pet type, summoning minions to deal heavy off damage and using other abilities to power up and summon more minions while dealing dots and direct damage. Basically, this game's summoner. Now, the combat in World of Warcraft feels very good, and I will admit that. The animation doesn't blind me when I hit a button, so I will give WoW its credit for having solid combat. Yeah, nothing bad to say here at all. I will have to say this again, but I did not make it to endgame, so I have no PvP experience. I have observed PvP with other WoW content creators, but when I look at it, I will have to say that it just does not seem to fit me. I'm just not that.
I wonder if any people who liked PvP in WoW who might feel a problem with how unbalanced the PvP in WoW has been in the last couple expansions, if any of them felt compelled to try Final Fantasy or move over to Final Fantasy just because of the crystalline conflict, which has been doing so well. I wonder if there's a group of people that had that happen to them.
That kind of person to be into PvP when it comes to MMOs. Not a real miss if all I want is the experience of playing WoW, but maybe someday I'll give it a try. I'd say I should try it very soon since PvP is a big thing in WoW, along with raiding. So, for the WoW vets out there, I will now shill my Discord so that you can see the opinion of one WoW vet who told me everything wrong in Shadowlands as it stands right now. This person had been playing World of Warcraft for a while and made it to endgame. So, if you want to check it out, come to my Discord so you can all agree how WoW is becoming the worst thing ever. Also, please try to keep it civil in there. We're all about the chill times in my Discord, so try to keep y'all ignorant sides in check if you don't mind. Overall though, WoW is 17 years old now, so I can't expect it to be smooth like butter as told by Chop Chop Master.
Bro, that's one way you can guarantee you're gonna get trolls in your chat. How do you guarantee you'll get trolls in your chat or your Discord? You say, guys, don't troll here. Whatever you do, do not troll here. Don't do it. Don't be a troll in my Discord. Don't be a troll in my Discord. You guess who that's gonna attract? All of the trolls.
Mr. Onion all the time. And again, I have to remind you that this is coming from a new player's point of view, not from endgame, so I have to really emphasize this. I've learned that add-ons is not something to evade or fear, but to embrace, because the community in the game—
Because you have to embrace add-ons, because the game is designed with the expectation that you use add-ons, because they allow these add-ons to exist to begin with, and because these add-ons exist to begin with, and they trivialize the content, now Ian and co had to be like, okay, well, how do we make the content fun and interesting again with the existence of these add-ons? Of course, we, design the raids in such a way where we expect you to have them. And so now people who never really opted into the add-ons to begin with now feel forced like they have to use the add-ons, because without the add-ons, not only is your team going to basically mauled and get mad at you for not using the elite boss mods, but you have to because the raids were designed with that in mind.
Game itself embraces add-ons. I felt that not looking into it would have been a waste. Though I do still prefer going vanilla when it comes to the game's standard functions, I will try to see if I can find more things to make playing WoW even more fun. I've also learned that World of Warcraft is just old. Honestly, they may want to start thinking about making a sequel to World of Warcraft. No offense, it's a fun game. Well, for me that is, since I'm still in the honeymoon phase, but a game with an engine that is getting up there in years right now may want to start seeing a successor. So, as a new player, I am not offended by the mechanics or the system.
And on the other side of that token, it's so crazy how much they've updated the game and the graphics on the engine that they've been using since vanilla. That's actually kind of wild how well they've done with it. Such an old engine.
And again, if you want to talk to a WoW vet in my Discord, or the WoW vet in my Discord, you can, once again, join it. And you can talk to them, as this guy really did leave a wall of text explaining why Shadowlands just did not work.
The journey, interesting.
So this last section has been rewritten over and over again. It was totally different before the lawsuit between Active Blizz and the state of California in the United States came to light. In the last section, I was essentially in the honeymoon phase of WoW, and I left it at that because I wanted you to have my genuine feelings on the game from the perspective of a new player. The only thing I really did not like was the story's disconnecting plots. For a long time now, I thought the negativity surrounding World of Warcraft was probably because the dev team most likely was not motivated to make a good game, but to make a game that would try to keep players playing and sometimes push them into spending more money, basically wasting their time while penny pinching them.
Yeah, and it's for that reason you see it shows that article where the WoW dev calls Asmongold an asshole. It's things like this, right, that make me think that Blizzard and, a lot of people internally really have a distaste in their mouth and maybe even resentment towards people who they would say are quote unquote like Asmongold or his ilk, people who say might not agree with the same things that the people internally at Blizzard agree upon together politically, or the way that they might judge their lifestyles, etc., etc. And they, in a way, want to isolate this community, and they want to isolate this group of people, and they don't want to try to design the game for them. And when someone like Asmongold complains about the game, they might be thinking things like, good riddance then. We didn't want you anyway. And I love Asmongold, and I'm definitely part of his community, so I feel like I'm lumped into this. In many ways, I feel like the game isn't designed for me anymore.
I had the notion that perhaps the devs were tired and have been doing this for way too long, and that the new player experience should blend in with the endgame experience so everyone was in the same pot. I had thought that the WoW refugees were just playing 14 as a means of rebellion against the company, time off away from the game, wanting to experience something new while spouting their disgust they accumulated over time with WoW, a way to deflate while waiting for new content to come out. Content that took 8 months to come out, and from what I've heard, a regular thing coming from Blizzard, as long dry periods for content is not something new for WoW players. I had thought that the dev team really wanted to make something great, that someone higher was holding them back, because business is business when it comes to companies, but the truth is a lot worse than I thought. I had found out that Blizzard was no longer the game company it once was.
I want to take a look at this picture. So you have Mets in here. Let's see, do I recognize anyone else here? I'm trying to find Kevin. Maybe he didn't join yet. Yeah, Kevin didn't join yet. I watched a documentary once on the founding of Blizzard, and it showed kind of like how they operated much like a frat house. This was the only woman who worked there for a while. Yeah. I want to see if I could find that documentary again. It's actually pretty good.
Instead, has become a company that makes games. From what I heard, some of the developers in the team didn't even seem like they were inspired to make a game to break the mold of MMOs. They felt as though they were making a status quo game, something that a 9-to-5 worker would make so they could get the paycheck at the end of the week. Some of the leaders at Blizzard don't even seem like they want to understand how the game was good in the past, and do not, or perhaps refuse to address any of the game's real issues, thinking that because it's WoW, that it'll always be okay and it will never fail. I felt
Here's the good news about WoW, though. The good news about WoW is now Lost Ark is out and is retaining a pretty big amount of players. The good news about WoW is that Final Fantasy is a really good game that a lot of people enjoy, including myself. The good news about WoW is no matter how they feel about their player base, no matter what ideologies they, kind of come to work with when they work on the game, no matter what they think about using synthetic engagement metrics, they could only do so for so long before they really start bleeding. And they've been bleeding. And because they've been bleeding, they've been trying to depend on the whales and the most hardcore, most addicted players. And those won't last forever, because those will leave the game if there's no regular players to flex on, And so ultimately, the good news about WoW is that eventually, if they want to survive, they're going to have to adapt, and they're going to give their player base what their player base wants and what their player base needs. Or else WoW is just going to become this very, very niche, obscure game at best that many people used to play and almost no one plays anymore. And we're already headed in that direction.
as a new player that it catered to people who are new, like me, but without the grand knowledge of how MMOs are supposed to work. I've been playing MMOs for years, and for it to have Exile's Reach to teach what seems to be baby's first MMO is outright insulting to me. Like, I get why Exile's Reach exists, and I appreciate it being here, but so many people thought I needed it for either game function know-how, which the game did an okay job teaching me before, or the butt-chunkus amount of experience that I could have obtained anywhere. Again, I'm in no rush to make it an endgame, and so many people have told me that that's where the game actually begins, which is a damn shame because I want to experience the history of World of Warcraft. I want to know its backstory. I want to know who are these people I'm fighting with and trying to save. I want to know what the world is like and why it ended up this way. I want to know about Azeroth and its creatures. I want to know about Jaina, Anduin, Thrall, Bane, Garrosh, and Illidan. I want to take my time with the story and...
You still kind of can, right? Because you have Chromie time. I mean, sure, you might have to make a new character, but you can still go back and you can play all of these expansions if you wanted to. And even though you're compelled to move on to Shadowlands around 48, you can still try to go through the rest of the campaigns. Like, you can still kind of do what he's saying. It's just not in a way that the game compels you to do it. Like, you're going to have to kind of seek out that experience yourself.
Level in a brisk pace. I want to see all the areas from the past expansions because it feels like it wants me to forget those. I want to know about the inner workings of the lore, the universe, and why my character exists. I just want to know the story. The best part about playing a fresh MMO is the discovery of all these different types of things. How to fight, how to craft, seeing the sights, and experiencing the story. For me, the story is the most important thing. I'm not here for just the raids and PvP content. I'm here to find out why Sylvanas is working with the jailer, why do the first one's relics only work for me, and why I'm supposed to be so important if every other character overshadows me in importance, especially since they were the ones kidnapped into the Shadowlands.
And it's Blizzard's fault for implying to a new player or giving the new player an idea that that's what you can expect from this game when it was never a story game to begin with, right? So, of course, some of it is a bias, a Final Fantasy 14 bias, because when I went into 14 myself, coming from WoW, I had the opposite bias that this story is going to be like an thing I had to go through, especially a Realm Reborn, and it's just something I have to go through to get to the later parts of the game. I came in with that I have to get through the slog to get to the good parts mindset, you know? So the thing is, though, it isn't just a Final Fantasy 14 bias. Why did he get the idea at all to begin with that he should expect an experience where they're going to deliver on some rich narrative driven storytelling? And I think it's because they try to do that, right? They try to put in all these cinematics and they try to take their story seriously, but they falter. They fail so hard. If they, created an expectation for new players that you can't expect that from this game. That's not what this game is about. This is not a narrative driven game. And he went into it with that expectation. I feel like he might have had a better experience, but that's not the way they design it.
Most of all, I'm playing World of Warcraft to see why so many players were leaving and what it was like for many of the refugees to play World of Warcraft in modern times. I'm not here to obtain the same feeling they got the first time they played WoW 10 or 15 years ago, because that will never happen. I'm also not here to make Final Fantasy XIV look so much better in comparison. 14 has its issues, a ton in fact. Even the new player experience could be better in 14, and in a way it kind of has. Like how the main scenario quest for A Realm Reborn yields more experience, and gear is easily obtained while you go through your journey to level 50.
And they're continuing to do this, right? I am new enough of a player where I didn't experience any of the Realm Reborn 6.0 content or any of the content before 6.1. Bro, but the 6.1 changes that they made to the end of A Realm Reborn up to Ultima Weapon, holy shit, that shit was fun. That is the most fun PvE content I have done in that game to date. And it just so happens to be the newest content, even though it's in A Realm Reborn, that I've experienced to date. And nothing in Heavensward mechanically has felt as fun and as challenging as the changes they made to A Realm Reborn in 6.1. And so, now that I have that taste in my mouth of how fun it can be, I can't wait till I get to the more modern raid design and see what that's like in the later expansions. And hopefully they keep iterating on that and they keep improving parts of Heavensward and they keep improving parts of Realm Reborn, maybe even Stormblood, and, putting in these more modern gameplay mechanics and these more modern encounter designs.
14's new player experience for me was slow since I came from 1.0. I came from a 14 that had no expansion, no A Realm Reborn, and no clue as to why 11 was so popular. I say this because 14 1.0 took a lot from 11, and I know a lot of people play Final Fantasy 11. Just bringing that into modern times didn't cut it. I wanted to know WoW a bit better, and unfortunately, I did. I found the game real fun and enjoyed my time, but as a veteran MMO player, I easily saw the cracks it was trying to hide, and to be honest, if the narrative was much better connected without the obvious plot holes, I would be saying that WoW lives up to its legendary status. If I didn't learn about the system and how it's trying to keep new and elite players from leaving with its amazing raids and epic story, I would be saying that WoW is a pretty solid journey, but I can't. WoW suffers from trying to keep an agenda going for all players, retention, with the top 5% and bottom 5% being the only ones really enjoying what's going on here. I can say I understand why so many have left, and after hearing the stories as to how WoW is treating players within the game, being disrespectful to their time and treating people like numbers, the only reason why I never saw or felt any of this was because I was having too much fun with their smoke screens and illusions. But the wonder eventually fizzled out, and I soon found myself skipping story for progression and rushing to the next voice cutscene with badly animated models. And that was only the WoW experience, my new player experience. As for the lawsuit that's underway, I can only speak of this in my own real voice. The last thing I want to talk about is Activision Blizzard and World of Warcraft itself, but here in the present time. What you heard throughout the video was me being very positive in the past about World of Warcraft. I wanted to keep that script in tow. I wanted to keep that because I wanted you to feel how I felt while playing the game in a new player's experience. Overall, I can sum it up as I like the new player experience in World of Warcraft. I just hate the fact that the lore and the story feels so diffused. I'm confused. I have no idea who these people are, where this location is, what the hell I'm doing. I feel lost in the game, and I think they try to really bank on the mechanics of the game.
They always have. Well, that's not actually true. They always banked on the social experience of the game. And then later on, they tried to bank on the mechanics of the game as well. But that's not to say that even early on, and until this very day, the polish and the feeling and the instancy you get when you hit a button on your MMO mouse or you hit a button on your keyboard and you pop off that skill, and the only way I can describe how it feels to engage in combat in World of Warcraft is buttery smooth. It feels smooth. It always has, and it still maintains that till this very day. And I, at the risk of pissing some of you off, I still think it feels nicer and it's more instant to hit a button in WoW than it is in Final Fantasy XIV. Fight me.
Don't know why they are trying to bank on the mechanics of the game. That is not what I feel an MMO should be entirely about. I don't think that the end game should be about just going into the raid and saying, a whole bunch of people say that the actual beginning of the game is when you reach the end, and I hate that. I don't like that. Honestly, it kind of pushes me back a bit, and I honestly think if I could have gone through the rest of the game and reached endgame, I probably would feel how other WoW vets feel and why they're here. The negativity that they got was unfounded. Just because they're from World of Warcraft doesn't mean that they deserve to have their game bashed or them bashed. I felt as though that I myself, as a player of the game who has played since the very beginning, should know more about my World of Warcraft brethren, my WoW refugees. I went in, I looked at WoW, I played WoW, I invested time in WoW. I got to know the lore, I got to know the people, the mechanics, the systems. People told me stories. They left walls of short stories for me. And it's not just that one, but there are plenty of people who told me why they played WoW for
fight me. If you guys don't like it, fight me.
For over a decade, only to be betrayed, or felt betrayed, or felt like that their time isn't being respected, or the systems that they constantly asked for them to change for only to be ignored. It sucked. I felt as though that I had a positive experience in the game, but I very, very, very quickly saw what was going on, and with all the people telling me what was happening at endgame and what would happen when I reach endgame, I was not looking forward to it. I'm gonna be honest, I wasn't looking forward to it. I don't hate World of Warcraft. In fact, if you want to play it, play the game. By all means, more power to you. And if you don't like 14, then that's fine. I'm not here to evangelize Final Fantasy 14. I'm not here for that. I'm also not here to feel the glory days of World of Warcraft. That's impossible. I just wanted to know why people were leaving a legendary game that is...
And it's even impossible if you go ahead and you try to play Classic, right? Because Classic is not the vanilla experience, even though the game is the same, because of the way that vanilla was so much a product of its time, and so much of it was a cultural phenomena. Back when I played vanilla, all my friends played it, all their parents played it, even random people I'd meet at random places would play it. Not so much so now. And the social experience has changed because of things like the fact that the game has been explored already, and then you have social media, and so you really can't go back to glory days, even if you tried. Unironically, JL and Breck was kind of right. That doesn't mean that they shouldn't have released Classic, and that doesn't mean that Classic wasn't a success. Absolutely it was, but it's not vanilla, and it's not the glory days.
World of Warcraft, and going in and having that perspective, that would make a lot of sense, and not just sit there and rag on it, or saying that these people from World of Warcraft, they suck, or say that WoW sucks without playing the game ever. And that was a good small little portion of the negativity that was coming from Final Fantasy XIV in our community, and that sucks. That's why I did it. I wanted to know. I wanted to pay like my respects to the people that were coming from the game. I honestly wanted to know. Like, so many people were leaving World of Warcraft, it didn't make any sense. There was a video left and right, and I wanted to go in and find out why and how and what's going on, you know? I really am disappointed in Activision Blizzard for what's going on right now, especially with the lawsuit. Honestly, I can't really talk about it so much because it just bums me out. But honestly, if it wasn't for that, I would be still playing World of Warcraft. It's my decision, my morality, to not spend on that subscription. It is my choice. So no.
Yeah, and this is a really complicated topic, right? It's a really complicated topic because ethical consumption is difficult to do. Look at your iPhone. This shirt I'm wearing right now was probably made by some, poor, underpaid child laborer in Malaysia or something, right? So it's difficult to even function on this planet without engaging in some bullshit like this, right? In one way or another. And so I understand why people would want to boycott stuff like this, but I also understand why people would not. I get both. And it's so complicated because also, like, do any people who work at Blizzard who had nothing to do with this get harmed because you're not paying for the sub anymore? I mean, it's the potential for that is there. There's always a potential that that's the case.
Nobody else has to. But when I look at the articles, when I look at the lawsuit, when I look at all this, it just makes me feel sad, and I can't for the life of me keep spending money at a company that does that. So I'm making the choice not to play World of Warcraft till further notice. And when they get their act together, or maybe when they make a WoW 2, or when they really do like start what's the word, pruning the pruning the problems out of the company, and then we see actual significant change, then maybe I'll come back. But that's it for me. I'm getting hot right now. I need to turn on my air conditioner. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you haven't, please sub to the channel. Though I am not a WoW content creator, I do a lot of lore content for Final Fantasy XIV. And if you want to go and check the backlogs on that, go right ahead.
Oh, and he makes lore videos too? So this guy really likes story. He really, really likes story.
I think I've made a couple playlists. I will continue to I'll continue to make my lore content after this video. I want to get back into that since Endwalker's coming out, and I'm also streaming right now. At this present time, I'm trying to get Necromancer on my character, and the only way you can do that is going through 200 floors in a place called the Palace of the Dead.
That sounds so difficult.
And it's kind of like a more solid Torghast. You'll see what I mean when you watch the stream. Just make sure you watch the stream. I'm here on YouTube, not really on Twitch all that much, but if I get a lot more people on Twitch, I'll switch over to Twitch when that happens.
Hardest time to get, yeah.
Thank you for watching the video. Hope I get your support, and I'll see you guys later. Stay vigilant out there, and good night.
No, this is good. I obviously didn't agree with everything that Sinkweaver said here, but in general, it was interesting hearing his honest and raw opinion of a game for the first time, especially since I had the exact opposite experience, right? I am a WoW Andy. I grew up on World of Warcraft. It's the game I played ever since. It's pretty much the only mono game I played from the ages of 12 all the way up to 23 or so, I didn't really play many other games besides that. So it's interesting seeing someone who comes from kind of the opposite perspective here, and seeing how my bias has shaped my experience with 14 and how his biases might have shaped his experience with WoW.